Have you ever witnessed a moment so shocking that an entire airport terminal fell silent in disbelief? Picture this: a packed gate at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, one of the busiest in the world, where chaos and urgency reign supreme. Suddenly, a flight attendant singles out a poised, gracious black woman and denies her rightful place in the boarding line for no apparent reason. Gasps ripple through the crowd, blood boils, and what happens next is so jaw-dropping that it not only halts the boarding process, but makes everyone question their own roles in this twisted turn of events. Get ready for a story that will leave you speechless. Simone Harrington was flying high on anticipation, both literally and figuratively. She woke up before dawn to drive to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the busiest travel hub in the United States. The air felt electric, as if the entire city of Atlanta hummed in unison with her excitement. This trip was not just any vacation. It was Simone's opportunity to meet with potential investors for her non-profit project aimed at bringing educational support to underrepresented children in underserved communities. She'd spent years drafting proposals, meeting with local officials, and forging friendships with sponsors. Now she was on the cusp of a major breakthrough. Her seat was booked in first class, a gift from her friend and mentor, Dr. Clarissa Richards, a retired educator who had championed Simone's cause for years. Dr. Richards believed in Simone's mission so completely that she upgraded Simone's ticket. Fly in comfort, Dr. Richards had insisted. Arrive at those meetings as your best self. Simone accepted the gift with tears of gratitude. The airport was teeming with life that morning. Business travelers tapping away at laptops, families corralling children in strollers, college students traveling for spring break, and flight attendants buzzing around in crisp uniforms. Simone floated through security. Some might call it beginner's luck with the lines, and soon found herself at her gate A22, well ahead of the boarding process. Never one to waste time. Simone pulled out her laptop to finalize the last details of her presentation. She sipped her lukewarm airport coffee, occasionally glancing up at the large digital screen displaying the flight schedule. Flight 412 to Seattle was on time. Everything seemed perfect. Across the gate, a flight attendant in full uniform was directing people to form an orderly line for the various boarding zones. Her name tag read Jenna. She moved with an air of authority, scanning tickets, glancing at passengers, and pointing to where they should queue. Simone, like every other first-class passenger, planned to board when her group was called, so she paid Jenna only passing attention at first. But something about Jenna's demeanor unsettled Simone. She didn't appear to be in a friendly mood. Her eyes were cold lips pressed tight, and she spoke in short, clipped tones. Simone watched as Jenna instructed a man in a wheelchair to wait until special accommodations are announced, despite him having a first-class ticket. Simone felt the tension, and Jenna, apparently noticing Simone's gaze, locked eyes with her for a moment before swiftly looking away. At the time, Simone didn't think too much of it. Airports were stressful places. Flight attendants were often under immense pressure. Jenna's irritability could have been due to any number of reasons: long working hours, a delayed earlier flight, or personal stress. Simone told herself not to jump to conclusions. The announcement crackled over the speakers: pre-boarding for passengers who need a little extra time and assistance. Simone watched families with small children, the elderly and passengers in wheelchairs approach the gate. Next, she heard the announcement for first-class travelers. Now boarding, first-class passengers. Please come forward with your boarding passes. Simone closed her laptop, tucked it away into her handbag, and gathered her belongings. She got in line with about a dozen other passengers destined for first class. Her heart fluttered. She was thrilled to be among them. This was her moment of pride, the stepping stone toward her dream meeting in Seattle. When she reached the front of the line, she could practically feel the scorching stare of Jenna. Holding out her boarding pass with a polite smile, Simone expected a simple scan and a gesture to enter the jetway. But Jenna didn't scan her pass. She frowned. "Excuse me, ma'am. We haven't called your group yet." Simone blinked. "I'm first class. I heard the announcement." Jenna crossed her arms, ignoring the scanning device in her hand. "We're only boarding passengers who qualify for early boarding or those with first-class tickets who've purchased priority privileges." Simone tilted her head. "That's me, actually." She kept her tone calm and respectful. "I have a seat in first-class 2A. By now, a small line formed behind Simone, including other first-class passengers. Most of them were white, a couple Latino and one Asian American woman. Jenna had processed them all quickly until she came to Simone. The tension thickened. People behind Simone began shifting, wondering what the holdup was. Another flight attendant, older and seemingly more experienced, stepped forward and glanced at Simone's boarding pass. "It looks correct to me," he said carefully, raising his eyebrows at Jenna. "Let's scan her through." But Jenna wouldn't budge. Instead, she fixed her gaze on Simone's face. "I'll need you to step aside, ma'am, until we verify your seat assignment." Now heads were turning. A ripple of murmurs spread through the line. One of the men behind Simone cleared his throat and said, "She's first class. Just let her board." Simone could feel a wave of embarrassment and anger begin to well up inside her. She kept her posture straight, voice controlled. "Is there a reason I'm being asked to step aside?" Jenna's face didn't soften. If anything, it hardened further. "You'll have to wait, ma'am. Please step aside so we can continue boarding others who have the right tickets." At this point, it was impossible not to notice the subtext. Others with first-class tickets, without question, had breezed right through. Simone was the only one receiving a challenge. It felt like a glaring sign that something else was at play her race. A hush fell upon the immediate area, the onlookers uncertain how to react, but aware they were witnessing something that felt very wrong. Simone tried to control the tremor in her voice. "I'm not stepping aside. I have the same privileges as anyone else with a first-class ticket." Jenna's eyes flickered with hostility. "Ma'am, either step aside voluntarily or I'll have security escort you. Those are the options." Now a mixture of shock and outrage rippled through the crowd. A few bystanders spoke up. "She has a first-class ticket. Let her board." "This is ridiculous. You scanned me, and my seat is right next to hers." Simone turned to see who had spoken. It was a tall African-American businessman, well-dressed in a tailored suit. He held out his boarding pass, seat 2B, directly next to Simone's seat, 2A. With the entire crowd bearing witness, Jenna lifted the intercom phone and made a call allegedly to security. Simone's heart pounded. She was outraged, humiliated, and shocked that this could be happening at all, let alone in one of the busiest airports in the country. Yet she also felt something else awaken within her, a fierce determination not to let this abuse of power stand. Within minutes, an airport official with a walkie-talkie approached. He wore a standard uniform, with a badge that identified him as part of the airport staff, not TSA or police. Looking uneasy, he turned to Jenna first. "What's the issue?" Jenna laid it out in a clipped tone. "This passenger refuses to comply with boarding procedures. She's holding up the line." Simone interjected calmly. "I have the correct ticket. Everyone else in first class has been allowed through except me. She's specifically blocking me for no valid reason." The airport official seemed confused, glancing between Jenna and Simone. Then he checked Simone's boarding pass. He frowned. "This is a legitimate ticket. I don't see the problem." Jenna's voice rose slightly. "We need to verify. There's likely a mistake in the system. She claims she's first class, but this might be an economy seat that was upgraded without authorization." Simone's exasperation spilled over. "That's absurd. The gate agent at check-in confirmed my seat. It's on my paper ticket, my digital pass, and the seat assignment is in the system." The official nodded. "Let me see the computer." He motioned for Jenna to let him access the tablet used for gate check-ins. She hesitated, but eventually stepped aside. Moments passed as the official typed something, scanning Simone's ticket barcode, verifying the seat number, time of purchase, and the status of her ticket. Then he looked at Jenna. "Everything checks out, Jenna. She's a valid first-class passenger." Jenna paled. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but found no valid words. The official turned to Simone. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Please board the plane with our apologies." Relief washed over Simone, but it was immediately followed by indignation and a sense of sorrow that in the year 2025, such blatant discrimination could still occur in the open. She glanced at Jenna's name tag, made a mental note, and then turned toward the jetway. The crowd parted, letting her pass, and a gentle smattering of applause followed her. However, as Simone headed toward the plane's entrance, she made a promise to herself. This will not be swept under the rug. Inside the plane, Simone found her luxurious first-class seat 2A, next to the African-American businessman who had spoken up earlier. He introduced himself as Robert Keyes, a marketing consultant who was heading to Seattle for a conference. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Robert said quietly, as the cabin's subdued lighting gleamed off the polished overhead compartments. "I've seen microaggressions before, but that was brazen." Simone swallowed hard. "Thank you for speaking up." An older white woman, seated across the aisle, leaned in. I saw everything she whispered. "That was so wrong. I'm going to write a complaint to the airline." Another passenger in front of them turned around. "I just tweeted about it," she said in a hushed tone. "You can't let that stand." Simone was touched by the outpouring of support. She felt validated, but also furious that a random stranger in uniform could so callously try to deny her the seat she rightfully purchased purely because of prejudice. The entire incident sparked a fire in her. She vowed to contact the airline's management customer service and possibly even local media outlets if need be. She was no stranger to advocacy. She had spent years championing educational rights. Now it was time to champion her own rights as a paying customer, and more importantly, a human being deserving respect. As the plane began to taxi away from the gate, she tried to focus on the future. She had a big presentation in Seattle. She needed clarity of mind, but her thoughts kept drifting to the injustice that had just transpired. Meanwhile, Robert kindly asked the flight attendant in their cabin for a glass of water for Simone, noticing she was visibly shaken. Simone accepted the water and closed her eyes for a moment. "I'll deal with it after we land," she promised herself, taking slow, measured breaths. Yet her intuition whispered that this would not be the last she saw of Jenna, or the last time that day she'd have to confront prejudice. 40 minutes into the flight, as Simone tried to lose herself in the in-flight magazine, a trembling voice crackled over the intercom. It was a different flight attendant, a young man. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the interruption. We have a situation on board that requires us to return to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." "Thank you." The cabin erupted in hushed confusion. Simone's eyes locked with Robert's, and her pulse picked up. A feeling of dread spread through the seats like electricity. What kind of situation would force a plane to turn back? Moments later, the pilot came over the PA system, sounding even more tense. "Folks, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing a passenger medical emergency in the main cabin. Out of an abundance of caution, we will be returning to Atlanta so the passenger can receive prompt medical attention. We appreciate your patience." The flight turned around. Simone closed her laptop, heart sinking. She felt a mixture of empathy for the person who was apparently in distress and frustration that her connecting plans might be jeopardized. She only had 1 day to travel and 1 day to secure the deal that could launch her non-profit to new heights. Time was not on her side. Another jolt of worry. Would she still be able to make her meeting in Seattle? She had factored in a small delay, but a full return to Atlanta could jeopardize her entire schedule. Yet empathy took priority. Someone was in dire need of medical assistance. Her business deals paled in comparison to a life-threatening situation. She and Robert exchanged glances. "At least we're close to the airport," he said. "Yes," Simone agreed nervously, tapping her fingers on the armrest. "I hope they're okay." In the flurry of flight attendants moving about, Simone spotted Jenna in the aisle, her face unreadable. The plane soon began its descent. Passengers' conversations grew anxious. The once excited energy had turned somber. Once the plane landed back in Atlanta, paramedics rushed on board. A middle-aged woman from economy class was swiftly placed on a stretcher and removed. The lead flight attendant thanked everyone for their cooperation. The pilot's voice came on again. "We appreciate your patience. We're waiting on clearance and instructions. Please remain seated with your belts fastened." Simone looked at her watch. Time was slipping through her fingers. Robert offered a small smile. "Don't worry. Airlines have ways of rebooking us." After about 15 minutes, the pilot made another announcement. "We will refuel and continue to Seattle. Passengers are advised to remain on board." A small wave of relief washed over Simone. She would still make it to Seattle, maybe not on time, but she'd have a fighting chance. She silently wished the best for the ill passenger. If everything went smoothly from here on out, she might salvage her plans. But everything did not go smoothly. Just as they were about to push back from the gate again, the pilot's voice returned this time with a tense undertone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that mechanical issues have been detected during our brief stay at the gate. We must disembark the aircraft for your safety. Please follow the flight attendant's instructions." The cabin filled with the sound of exasperated sighs and disappointed groans. Luggage was pulled from overhead bins, and passengers prepared to file out. Simone's anxiety climbed. Each delay chipped away at her carefully planned schedule in Seattle. Following the directions, the first-class cabin led the line out into the jetway. As Simone stepped into the airport gate area, she saw a group of airline employees waiting. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized Jenna among them, standing with crossed arms. Next to her was a stern-faced woman in a blazer, apparently some kind of supervisor. The passengers filed into the waiting area, uncertain if they should remain or rebook. The supervisor raised her voice above the chatter. "Passengers for Flight 412 to Seattle, please remain in the waiting area. We will make an announcement shortly." Simone opened her phone to check potential connecting flights, or rebook options, anything that could keep her meeting alive. Robert was doing the same. Suddenly, she heard a commotion near the gate desk. She looked up to see Jenna talking animatedly to the supervisor, gesturing toward Simone. A cold sensation slid down Simone's spine. Was Jenna stirring up more trouble? Moments later, the supervisor approached Simone, with Jenna trailing behind. The supervisor cleared her throat. "Ma'am, I understand there was an incident earlier with your boarding pass." Simone blinked. "Yes, we resolved it. As it turned out, everything was correct. Is there a problem now?" Jenna's gaze was like a spear. The supervisor hesitated. "We've had a report that you were uncooperative and combative with one of our flight attendants. We need to discuss that." A flicker of disbelief registered in Simone's mind. "I was not combative. I simply refused to relinquish my rightful seat in first class." Passengers nearby overheard and began to circle closer, their eyes flicking between Simone and the airline staff. Robert stepped forward. "I was right behind her in line. She did absolutely nothing wrong. Your flight attendant refused to let her board. You can't twist this around and blame the victim." The supervisor's face reddened slightly. Clearly, this situation was far more complicated than she had anticipated. She glanced at Jenna, who appeared indignant, then back at Simone. "Is there any evidence or any witnesses who can confirm your side of the story?" "Ma'am?" Simone's eyes widened. "There are plenty of witnesses. Many are standing right here, including your own co-worker, who checked my ticket and cleared me." Before Jenna could protest, a chorus of voices rose up. "I saw it." She was singled out. "I'll give you my name and contact information. That flight attendant was at fault." The supervisor looked taken aback. She raised her hands. "All right, please, we need to handle this calmly and professionally. I will talk to the relevant parties and get statements. For now, can we all wait while I consult with my colleagues?" Simone nodded, relief and anger swirling together inside her. "Yes, that's fine. But I'm not letting this go. I was publicly humiliated, discriminated against, and now I'm being accused of being combative." The supervisor pursed her lips. "I understand. We'll sort this out." Meanwhile, Jenna shot Simone one last venomous glare before stepping away with the supervisor, presumably to defend herself. As passengers waited for news about Flight 412, the tension in the gate area was palpable. Some milled around the charging stations, while others lined up at a customer service desk to rebook flights. Simone weighed her options. Should she stick around, hoping the plane would be repaired soon? Or should she try to get a seat on another flight? She had to be in Seattle by evening at the latest, or she'd miss her entire presentation opportunity. She scrolled through flight alternatives on her phone. The next direct flight from Atlanta to Seattle was in 4 hours. She could possibly take that instead. But her seat wasn't guaranteed, and there was no telling if it was already sold out. Also, there was the matter of this blatant discrimination. She wanted accountability. Standing near a window that overlooked the runway, Simone dialed the airline's customer service. The wait time was ridiculous, nearly an hour on hold. Frustrated, she ended the call. Robert suggested visiting the airline lounge to find a more helpful staff member, but Simone wasn't about to leave the gate. She wanted the situation documented in real time. About half an hour later, the supervisor returned, her expression grim but composed. She approached Simone with Jenna noticeably absent. "Ma'am, I've spoken to multiple witnesses, including one of our employees. I'd like to formally apologize on behalf of the airline for your experience. This is not how we operate, and we take any allegations of discrimination very seriously." A small wave of relief washed over Simone. Thank you. I appreciate the apology. But what does this mean in terms of next steps? The supervisor paused, glancing at the murmuring crowd of onlookers. Ms. Cooper. I'm sorry I didn't catch your full name. Harrington. Simone Harrington. Ms. Harrington. We value you as a customer, and we do not tolerate discrimination. At this moment, we are suspending Miss Jenner from duties pending further investigation. We'll also provide you a direct line to our Customer Relations Department to file a detailed account. We will ensure you receive swift follow-up on this matter. Simone exhaled slowly. She recognized a small step of progress. And what about my flight to Seattle? The supervisor nodded. You are automatically rebooked in first class on the next available flight, which departs in 4 hours. We'll provide lounge access in the interim. Your seat is confirmed. Simone's relief warred with ongoing anger. She had wanted to keep traveling on the same flight, but mechanical issues made that impossible. At least she had a guaranteed seat. Thank you. I appreciate it. Robert also received the rebooking, along with other first-class passengers. The tension around the gate began to dissipate, though some still lingered to watch Jenner's outcome or to air their own grievances. Simone felt a sense of vindication, but the damage was done. She had lost precious time on her trip, and the emotional toll left her shaken. The next hours blurred into a haze of phone calls, emails, and coffee cups drained in the airline lounge. Simone wrote a formal complaint, carefully detailing everything from Jenner's first suspicious look to the humiliating confrontation in front of other passengers. She forwarded copies of her ticket receipts, seat confirmations, and asked Robert to sign as a witness. Others from the flight also volunteered to support her complaint. Simone felt heartened by the solidarity from strangers. She also kept watch on social media. The passenger who had tweeted about the incident earlier had gained some traction. A hashtag, #StandWithSimone, was circulating among a small group of outraged travelers. A few popular activist accounts started sharing it. Simone was both touched and slightly overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Meanwhile, airport staff occasionally passed by, whispering about the meltdown with Flight 412. She heard rumors that the mechanical issue was actually minor, but the airline was taking no chances after the in-air medical emergency. The official story was that the flight would depart later that day or be cancelled entirely. In either case, Simone's seat was now on a different plane altogether. At last, the 4 hours crept by. It was time to board the new flight. Robert accompanied Simone to the gate, and to her immense relief, there was no sign of Jenner. A different set of flight attendants were present, scanning tickets without drama. Simone stepped onto the plane and breathed in the calm, though she was still on edge, half expecting another problem. As she settled into her seat, she sent a silent prayer that this trip would finally carry her to Seattle. She had lost half a day. She needed every minute once she landed. The flight passed uneventfully to Simone's immense gratitude. She briefly slept, ate the in-flight meal, and tried to refocus on her presentation. By the time they landed in Seattle, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. She dashed off the plane, ignoring her usual habit of waiting patiently. Time was short. Her phone buzzed with messages, some from her Seattle contacts, a few from Dr. Richards, who was worried about her delayed arrival. Simone typed out a quick text. Just landed. On my way to the hotel. Will update soon. With a whirlwind efficiency, she hailed a cab. The driver took a roundabout route through Seattle's rush hour, but eventually she arrived at the downtown hotel hosting her meeting. She had missed the morning session, but her main presentation was scheduled for late afternoon. She sprinted to the conference room, heart hammering. Despite the day's upheaval, Simone nailed her presentation. Her passion shone through every slide. Investors in the room found her sincerity and her well-researched program compelling. By the end, applause filled the space. Some approached her with business cards and promises to talk more. A sense of triumph spread through Simone, and she almost forgot the nightmare at the airport. Almost. That night, back in her hotel room, Simone checked her emails. One subject line read, "Urgent airline discrimination case, follow-up." She felt her heart skip. Clicking it open, she found a personal email from an official in the airline's customer relations department. They apologized again for the incident, assured her that an internal investigation was underway, and promised to provide compensation for the emotional distress and inconvenience. They also asked if she would be open to sharing her story for sensitivity training modules. Simone read it twice. The request felt sincere, but she also worried about being used as a token or case study. Simone typed a cautious reply. "I am open to discussing my experience if it leads to real policy changes and accountability. I expect follow-through, not just a PR move. Let's schedule a call." She also noticed that social media traction was growing. A few major news outlets had picked up the #StandWithSimone tag. Several had reached out to her for a comment. The story was resonating, stirring up conversations about racism in the airline industry and the passengers' rights. Simone felt overwhelmed by the sudden spotlight, but also compelled to speak out. She drafted a brief statement that she emailed to the interested reporters. "I believe my situation is not unique. Many black travelers encounter prejudice, be it subtle or overt. I am grateful for the support of bystanders and for those who spoke up. I hope the airline uses this incident to implement meaningful changes in training and accountability to prevent future discrimination." She pressed send, exhaling the tension in her shoulders. Then she stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the day's stress. By the next day, Simone's phone was buzzing off the hook. Journalists from CNN, local Atlanta stations, and even smaller blogs wanted to talk to her. The airline's PR department also reached out again this time, asking if she would participate in a sit-down interview with them. Their goal was to clear the air and demonstrate their dedication to diversity and inclusion. Simone hesitated. She was no publicity hound, but she recognized the potential impact. Through her non-profit work, she had always championed fairness and equality. Now fate had placed her in a position to highlight the reality of racial bias. After conferring with Dr. Richards, Simone decided to accept an interview invitation from a local Atlanta news station, WSB-TV, to share her story. As soon as she returned to Atlanta, Simone found herself in a modest TV studio, bright lights shining down on her, a microphone clipped to her jacket. The interviewer, Marianne Lewis, asked pointed questions about the incident, how it made Simone feel, and what changes she hoped to see. Simone's voice trembled at first, but she soon regained her composure. "I want this to be more than a headline. I want genuine training for airline employees, accountability measures, and an assurance that no one else faces what I did simply because of the color of their skin." Ms. Lewis nodded sympathetically. "Has the airline offered any specifics? I've had discussions with their customer relations team. They claim to be investigating. But I haven't seen a concrete plan yet." By the end, the interview felt cathartic. Simone spoke her truth, and the station promised to run a segment during prime time. She left the building with a mixture of nerves and relief, uncertain how the public would respond. A few days later, Simone received an unexpected phone call. The airline's human resources department asked if she would attend a meeting at their Atlanta airport offices to discuss her complaint. They mentioned the presence of the union representative for flight attendants and their own corporate diversity officer. Simone considered it carefully. Part of her wanted never to set foot in that airport again, but another part felt compelled to face the situation head-on and hold them accountable in person. After conferring with her lawyer friend, Tamara, who specialized in employment law, Simone agreed. The airline offered to pay for her transportation to and from the airport. On the scheduled day, Simone arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport with Tamara. They were directed to a conference room near the admin offices. Inside, they found a panel of corporate faces, each with a forced smile. The diversity officer introduced herself as Dr. Helena Park. The union rep was a middle-aged man in a neat suit, eyebrows knit in concern. And then, to Simone's surprise, Jenna was also present. She stood off to the side, her expression tense. The meeting began with Dr. Park apologizing on behalf of the airline, emphasizing the importance of unbiased and respectful customer service. The union rep stated that Jenna was willing to make a statement. Simone's chest tightened as Jenna opened her mouth. Her voice shook. "I realize my actions caused distress and were perceived as discriminatory. I want to apologize for any harm or discomfort. I'm not a racist person. I was under severe stress that day. I made a poor judgment call." A swirl of conflicting emotions raged through Simone. She appreciated hearing some semblance of an apology, but the words perceived as discriminatory stung. Was Jenna merely reading from a script? Simone spoke up. "I don't think you understand the gravity of what happened. I was publicly humiliated, singled out. If not for the bystanders, you would have had me removed from a flight I had every right to be on." Jenna's face tightened. "I'm sorry you feel that way." Tamara interjected politely but firmly. "Miss Harrington doesn't just feel that way. It's an objective fact that Ms. Harrington had a legitimate first-class ticket. The gate agent and other witnesses confirmed she was singled out on no valid grounds. Her rights as a passenger were violated." The union rep stepped in, gently placing a hand on Jenna's shoulder. "We want a resolution that fosters understanding. Jenna's record prior to this incident was clean. Perhaps there's a path forward here." Simone studied Jenna, seeing the fear in her eyes. For a brief moment, she wondered about Jenna's personal struggles, what might have caused her to lash out. But she also remembered the burning shame of that day. "I'm open to a path forward," Simone said, her voice unwavering, "but not without real consequences and real change." The airline reps nodded in unison. They outlined their plan. Jenna was placed on unpaid leave. She would undergo mandatory diversity and racial sensitivity training. The airline would incorporate Simone's case anonymously, if desired, into their training modules. A final official apology was to be issued to Simone, along with compensation for the missed meeting time stress and the near-ruined trip. At the end, Dr. Park turned to Simone. "We hope you'll accept this outcome." Simone took a deep breath. "That depends. Are you truly committed to ensuring no other passenger goes through this? Words on paper are meaningless without accountability. I want to see real proof these initiatives will be enforced." Dr. Park promised to follow up with detailed documentation and an update every 6 months for a year. The tension in the room lessened slightly. Jenna looked at the floor, silent. Thinking the ordeal was nearing its conclusion, Simone stood to leave. But just then, an urgent knock sounded on the conference room door. Another airline employee, out of breath, poked his head in. "We need Ms. Harrington at the terminal. There's a group of protesters chanting her name." Simone's stomach flipped. Protesters Dr. Park blanched. What do you mean? They're in the main terminal near the A concourse. They're holding signs with the #StandWithSimone hashtag, chanting about racial justice in the airline industry. Simone looked at Tamara. Baffled. She hadn't organized any protest. She wasn't even aware one was planned. A strange mixture of pride and nervousness washed over her. She had no idea her story had ignited such a response. Dr. Park cleared her throat. We certainly don't want a disruptive demonstration in the terminal. Ms. Harrington, would you be willing to speak to them? Simone hesitated. She wasn't a politician or a celebrity. But these people were out there supporting her, standing up for justice. I'll talk to them, sure. Jenna's eyes flicked toward Simone. Her expression conflicted. Whatever illusions she had that Simone would just disappear quietly were now shattered. Simone left the conference room and followed the out-of-breath airline employee to the terminal. When they emerged, a small crowd of about 30 people were gathered, carrying signs reading, "No seat for racism. Stand with Simone, and we deserve respect." Security stood nearby, keeping the crowd orderly but watchful. Some passengers rushed by, uncertain what was happening. Upon seeing Simone, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Someone thrust a makeshift megaphone at her. Voices chanted her name. Simone's cheeks burned with a swirl of humility and gratitude. She gingerly took the megaphone. "Thank you," she began, her voice shaking. "I'm overwhelmed by your support. I never imagined sharing my story would lead to all this. But I'm grateful you're here, standing for the rights of every passenger to be treated with dignity regardless of race or background." The crowd cheered again. A local news crew was present, camera rolling. Simone continued, her voice growing stronger. "I want real change, not just apologies. This airline and every airline needs to train its staff better. We won't tolerate discrimination in our skies or on the ground." A woman in the crowd shouted, "We support you, Simone." Another added, "Keep fighting." Simone felt tears well up. She promised them she would stay vigilant, keep in touch with the airline's progress, and use her platform to push for accountability. The demonstration ended with a round of applause. Airport security gently ushered the crowd outside, reminding them of rules against large gatherings in the terminal. But the energy remained electric. The days following Simone's speech at the airport terminal were nothing short of extraordinary. What had begun as a humiliating moment at a boarding gate transformed into a national conversation about discrimination in the skies. Her story, once just a first-hand account, was now a symbol, a rallying point for those who had suffered similar indignities. Simone's schedule filled quickly. Invitations poured in for interviews, conferences, and diversity panels. But amidst the chaos, she stayed grounded. Her priority was always her non-profit. The exposure turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Donors who had never heard of her initiative before now reached out with interest. Within a few weeks, she had more funding offers than she could manage, all because she had chosen to stand firm that day. And karma. It had a sharp edge for Jenna. While the airline's official statement had only mentioned a temporary suspension pending investigation, Simone eventually learned through insiders and a quietly forwarded email that Jenna's record wasn't as spotless as claimed. Several passengers from previous flights came forward. A Latino family had filed a complaint months earlier, but it had been brushed aside. A young man with autism recalled how Jenna had mocked his stutter mid-flight. There were patterns, and now the spotlight was too bright to ignore. The airline, fearing a deeper disaster, had no choice. Jenna was terminated. Her dismissal wasn't announced publicly, but employees whispered it through terminals, and travel forums began discussing the attendant from Gate A22. Her name had become synonymous with unchecked bias. Her attempts to explain herself on social media only backfired. Screenshots of her posts, combined with video footage from the terminal, fueled further outrage. Her reputation in the aviation world was tarnished, and no reputable airline wanted the baggage. Simone didn't relish Jenna's downfall, but she didn't pity her either. Actions have consequences. The humiliation, the gaslighting, the blatant discrimination, none of it could be undone. But Jenna's removal was a statement that change was possible, and silence would no longer be tolerated. And in a twist no one saw coming, the airline's CEO personally called Simone. His tone was measured but sincere. He acknowledged the failure on their part, not only in how Simone was treated, but in how they had overlooked similar complaints in the past. Then he made an offer, a corporate sponsorship for Simone's non-profit, tied directly to youth education and racial equity initiatives. It wasn't just a check, it came with a promise of internal reform, updated employee training, the appointment of a new diversity oversight officer, and quarterly audits. Simone didn't accept immediately. She met with her board, consulted with Dr. Richards, and even brought in a legal advisor. She wasn't about to let her mission be used as a hollow PR stunt. "I will only agree," she said firmly, "if the funds are distributed to grassroots programs without restriction. And I want quarterly reports, not just on the sponsorship, but on your training outcomes. Transparency, or it's a no." To her surprise, the airline agreed. In the end, Simone signed the contract, but with clauses that gave her control. The funds went directly to community libraries, coding boot camps for girls of color, and mentorship programs. The airline's logo was never front and center. Instead, the focus was on the kids, the classrooms, and the lives being transformed. Simone had started this journey with a suitcase and a dream, but now she was holding a torch that lit the way for thousands of others. The weeks rolled on, but the impact of Simone's stand did not fade. If anything, it grew deeper roots. The airline's sponsorship wasn't just a one-time gesture, it became a gateway, with the added funding and national exposure. Simone's non-profit blossomed. What had once been a dream sketched on scrap paper and late-night brainstorming sessions now took on a life of its own. New hires joined the team. Outreach expanded into rural counties, and Simone found herself juggling media interviews between community planning meetings and classroom visits. Dr. Richards was elated. "I told you," she said with tears in her eyes during one late-night phone call, "your work was always going to reach beyond the walls of a school building." Simone nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "I never imagined it would happen like this." Her story had touched a nerve in the nation, highlighting that racism wasn't confined to small corners, but could flourish in polished places, on jetways, in uniforms, hidden beneath policy and procedure. She was invited to join several roundtables discussing customer rights in the aviation industry, and eventually became an unofficial advisor to a congressional subcommittee on transportation equity. And yet Simone never lost sight of her roots. She visited classrooms regularly, sat with kids during story time, and worked with parents on community solutions. Her vision had always been clear: empower the underserved. Now she just had a bigger megaphone. But amid all the good, Simone often thought about the emotional weight she still carried. The trauma of that day hadn't vanished. She still found herself gripping her purse tighter in airports, flinching when a uniformed attendant approached. Progress was real, but so was the residue of public humiliation and anxiety. Therapy sessions helped her process it. Writing helped too. In her private journal, she poured out the moments the cameras didn't catch. The nights she cried alone in hotel rooms. The nightmares where she relived being told to step aside, the deep ache of being treated like a problem in a place she'd paid to be. And yet every time a young girl hugged her after a classroom visit or a parent said, "Thank you for fighting," Simone felt the scales tipping. Slowly but surely, the non-profit's new regional hub opened in Montgomery, Alabama, just months after the airline partnership began. It was symbolic, planting a flag in a place rich with civil rights history. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, local leaders, educators, and children filled the building with laughter and hope. Simone stood at the podium, the warm southern wind brushing her curls, and smiled. "This space belongs to you," she said, her voice steady and proud. "May it always be a place of possibility." Later that night, as she stood outside watching the stars emerge over the city skyline, Simone whispered a quiet promise to herself. "I won't let this movement fade." Nearly 6 months had passed since the day Simone had been blocked from boarding, and yet it still lingered in her mind like a distant echo, sometimes quiet, sometimes sharp. The world had changed for her in so many ways. Since then, her non-profit had expanded. Her voice had gained weight in national discussions, and the airline industry had been nudged, however slightly, toward accountability. Still, there was one thing Simone hadn't done, not since that day at Gate A22. Fly. Until now. She stood once more inside Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta, International Airport, ticket in hand, heart pounding beneath her crisp blazer. She was heading to New York City this time for a keynote speech at a youth empowerment summit. The flight itself was short. The significance, however, was massive. She had booked a first-class seat again, not out of indulgence, but out of principle. Her assistant, Janelle, had offered to accompany her, but Simone insisted on going alone. "This one's personal," she had said, with a soft smile. "I need to walk through this gate by myself." The terminal hummed with the familiar sound of rolling luggage and overhead announcements. As she approached her gate this time, Gate B18, her eyes scanned the scene cautiously. She wasn't looking for Jenna, of course. Jenna was long gone. But trauma had a way of casting shadows in familiar places. The flight attendant at the boarding desk, a young black woman with soft locks and a bright name tag that read, Alyssa, caught her eye. "Good afternoon, Ms. Harrington," she said, warmly glancing at the ticket. "We're honored to have you flying with us. Welcome aboard." Simone froze for a split second, not because she doubted the sincerity in the woman's voice, but because it was the first time in months she had been greeted with the exact opposite energy of what she had once endured. She smiled. "Thank you. It's good to be back." As Simone walked down the jetway and into the plane, she felt the air change, not just physically, but emotionally. This wasn't just another flight. It was a reclaiming. Her first-class seat was spacious and serene. She placed her bag beneath the seat buckled in and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman leaned over. "Are you the woman from the airline story a while back? The one who stood up at the terminal?" Simone blinked, then nodded gently. "Yes, I am." The woman offered her hand. "Thank you for what you did. You inspired more people than you'll ever know." Simone shook her hand, a flush of humility rising in her cheeks. "That means more than you know." The plane began to taxi. As the engines roared to life, Simone looked out the window, watching the runway lights blur beneath her. She thought of everything, the tears, the protesters, the sleepless nights, the children now benefiting from her programs, the difficult but necessary meetings with airline executives, and the uncertain path that led her here. She wasn't the same woman who had stepped up to the boarding line that day. She was stronger, louder, and more focused. And though scars remained, they no longer held her hostage. As the aircraft lifted into the sky, Simone allowed herself to smile truly deeply. Smile. She was flying not just in the physical sense, but in every way that mattered. Above the clouds, she felt light, free. She reached into her tote and pulled out a folder labeled Youth Summit, NYC, and began reviewing her speech. Her opening line read, "Sometimes the world tries to seat you in a smaller place, but don't let them shrink your worth to fit their comfort." And as the plane soared higher, so did Simone toward her next purpose, her next victory, her next horizon. And so ends the tumultuous journey that began with a blatant act of racism at the airport terminal. Simone's courage in calling out discrimination changed not only her life, but also spurred an entire corporation to reevaluate its practices. It ignited conversations across social media, sparked a protest in one of the world's busiest airports, and forever etched the importance of speaking truth to power into countless hearts. Though one flight attendant lost her job due to her own repeated bias, the ripple effect of Simone's stand opened doors for better training, meaningful partnerships, and real progress in the airline industry. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power in unity and the necessity of justice, take a moment now to like, share, and subscribe. Let's spread awareness and encourage more people to stand up for what's right, no matter where they find themselves. Your support makes a difference,